Welcome everyone. I'm Jeffrey Goodman, Director of Marketing and Development for the YMCA of Northwest Louisiana. We're here at 318 Latino Studios for Shreveport-Bossier, my city, my community, my home. And we have an absolute first today. I've got a friend here, but also a former employer, which I've never had before. So look forward to speaking with Kempten Schwab. Kempten?
Hey, Jeffrey.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Well, I know you want to ask me some questions, but we're going to start with you and then we'll just see where this goes.
Fantastic. I'm all in.
Okay. All right. So my first thing for you is you appear to have had 3 large chapters in your professional career. The European Union, at Praeses here in Shreveport, and now helping owners with equity transactions. I can only speak directly about the second one when I worked for you at Praeses. One of the things that impressed me the most at Praeses was the talent you had assembled and the people you had working with you. So my question is, can you talk about some of your hiring philosophy? How much is instinct, and what types of people do you typically like to have on your teams?
Wow, that's a lot to comment on, but thank you for asking. If you think back to my first professional stop in Brussels for the EU, my role was on a team of people doing research and preparing elected officials that we call delegations to go to underdeveloped parts of the world to try to promote better economic stability. So for a couple of years, I was constantly researching and looking at parts of the world that really needed help. And we would send our delegations there to try to help advise and counsel leadership in those nation states for the betterment of their overall country. In that experience, in working with folks from a variety of European countries and obviously researching a lot of different cultures in different countries around the world, I started to really understand some commonality and in humanity, and some of the things that reveal themselves regardless of where you are on the planet, which I find refreshing, are transparency, honesty, genuine, forthright effort to accomplish activities for the betterment of self and beyond. And the ones that are really powerful are those that accomplish beyond first and self second. And so in any relationship, like you and I working together, and as privileged to have worked with you for a number of years,
likewise,
we were constantly trying to create something of value, and we leaned into others first and then reward second. And so when I see folks that embrace that and they represent that philosophy in their character and their behaviors over and over again, I'm drawn to them. And when that occurs, it's a combination of seeing their behavior patterns in real life and being intrinsically excited about working with them on certain things together, and then bringing them to hopefully an environment where together we could do more than we could individually. So whether that's at the European Union or whether that was here at Praeses or what I do now, I constantly seek to surround myself with folks that embrace those type of characteristics in their behavior patterns. And so far, I've had a tremendous amount of success with some long-term relationships. And I'm grateful to be able to say that I have friends globally. And I'm thrilled with some of the successes that I've seen others achieve that for which I've been present to watch.
Do you think for those of you that don't know, you were a D1 soccer player at South Carolina, a goalkeeper, so clearly highly successful in a team sports environment. Do you think that informed at all this feeling that we can do more as a team than I can on my own?
I think Some of that, yes. I can remember, it takes me back decades. I can remember, having requirements in cardiovascular exercise to be able to participate at certain levels, that were set forth by the coach. Like you have to be able to run a mile and a half in this time frame or 3.1 miles in this time frame, et cetera. I can remember just naturally wanting to, make sure I was in a good enough shape to hit the bell, but also being a part of trying to help others that maybe struggle with that a little bit. And I can remember just for whatever reason wanting to go back and run the last lap with teammates of mine to try to make sure that maybe I gave them a little bit of a pace that would help them hit the mark. And I think some of that is natural. Some of that comes from my upbringing, and it does resonate in activity professionally. And so I think there's some of that was drawn from my time playing soccer.
I will say, I'm going to interrupt too. I will say for people, I believe this. I'm the youngest of three. You're the oldest of three. And I think being the oldest brother, the oldest sibling does influence a little bit your personality and your wanting to help others as well.
Absolutely. I have a father-in-law that could sit here and speak on birth order and how important that is with regard to, your behavior patterns later in life. But even not just learning that from playing sports at a high level, but also learning some of the business behind the machine of Division I athletics was really impactful for me, and seeing how scholarship dollars were or were not allocated, seeing how players from different parts of the world were treated to recruit and attract them into the program, and how people in the program were treated either positively or negatively, given the totality of a large athletic department, which is interesting to see how different it is today. Needless to say, I'm holding out for my settlement check. I think that by the time it's prorated, it's going to be roughly around 7 cents, maybe 8. But I did get a kick out of the fact that now athletes are going to be recognized for the level of effort that they're going to put forward in a Division I experience for athletics.
Awesome. All right. Well, you've talked about your parents always being consistent with the message of learning how to think critically. So my next question is, if you would, define and talk about this and how you think it served you throughout your career.
Absolutely. I can think of lots of different places where that's relevant. And it just comes through natural inquiry. So if someone tells you something or they make a statement in support of something with which they believe, I naturally want to understand and ask why. And so, there are people that will tell you what they think you want to hear. That's not satisfactory to me, because all you're doing is appeasing your perception of what I might want. So I want to go further. So I want to ask why. Why is that the best decision? Why is that the best course of action? Why is that the best for all involved? And my parents allowed me at a young age to ask why. And because I said so was not the typical answer. My parents explained themselves, and they were kind to elaborate. And so at a young age, I was encouraged to ask why a lot.
And they would say that? They would say, ask us why? Or
no, they wouldn't ask me to ask them why. They would encourage me as I navigated life to ask why.
But do you have any memory of first realizing, like, I've got the space and the freedom and the support to do this?
I challenged it. The first thing that comes to my mind is we were living in London. So I'm in the 6th grade living in London, and I decided not to go to school one day, and I was drawn to the subway system and the tube, as they call it in London. And so I decided not to go to school and to get a day pass, and as a 12-year-old ride on my own throughout the city of London. I went all the way out to, I think, I can't remember the stop on the green line at the end, and all the way out to the end of the blue line, and got out and looked around. And when I was obviously caught because I didn't show up for attendance and the headmaster reported to my parents, they allowed me to explain myself. Now, I still was punished and I still had to face the consequences of not going to school, but I wasn't chastised for being curious about my surroundings. And so I think that's the first thing that comes to mind when you ask that question about my childhood and how my parents managed through that. Now, fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, a handful of weeks later was the 1983 bombing of Harrods, and we were retained in school because the High Street Kensington was shut down. And fortunately, my escapades happened before that because I don't think my parents would have been quite so lenient with me had it happened after that tragedy.
Yeah, love it. All right, so let's fast forward to your current life. You're now, if I get anything wrong, correct me, but you're now the managing director for STS Capital Partners. I pulled this off the website, so everyone hang in there with me. A global mergers and acquisitions firm specializing in sell-side consulting and advisory services for entrepreneurial business owners.
Yes, that is well taken from the website. I'll try to bring it to you in a little different light.
You will, because I'm gonna ask you questions and we're gonna drill down. So we're gonna camp out on STS for a while.
Okay, no problem.
So let's start here with respect to that. My first question is, talk to me about how many companies go through an exit and what the difference is between a proactive and reactive exit.
All right, excellent question. First of all, every company that is formed goes through an exit. 100% of them do. They cease to exist. They file bankruptcy. They sell to another party. They are transitioned through estate planning to the next generation. But 100% of companies go through an exit. What I found is that business owners of organizations that are proactive in thinking through and being intentional about their strategies around the equity they hold in their organizations tend to have greater success in those experiences than business owners that react to people that call them about buying their company or call them about investing capital into their business. And so to answer your question specifically, they all go through an exit. The ones that I find more successful are those that are proactive about it and think and lean forward into that experience as a business owner versus allowing transactions to happen to them. And
so your company, so in layman's terms, STS, I'm gonna give it in real layman terms and then let you jump on top of it. But STS helps companies to have strategic exits.
Yes. So what we do is, I think you'll like this. I'm going to draw a little bit on the fact that we're about the same generation. You remember the television show The A-Team?
Sure.
And you remember how the A-Team began? It had a voiceover that basically said, if you've got a problem and you can find them, maybe you could hire the A-Team. Our firm is a boutique set of former business owners. So we are honored to have come from being equity owners ourselves and to have gone through exits ourselves. And so we lean into intimate and intentional relationships with our clients when it comes to the monetization of the equity they hold in their operating companies. And so we provide consultation, guidance, and assistance whenever they seek to monetize the equity that they have. Now, we do that by thinking very deeply about the components of the business that they're going to monetize. And businesses have all different types of components to them. The special sauce of a company could be the employees that they have. It could be their geographic footprint. It could be a safety program that they've implemented that is unique. It could be a technology application that they've developed. There's all sorts of different components that make up the DNA of a business. When you're guiding an owner through an exit, instead of thinking about the traditional multiples of that industry and what financial transactions that industry look like, what we really try to do is get to the root of the issue and understand deeply the DNA of the company, and then think about what operating industry or entity, what operating entity would value owning that the most, right? And so if you can do that, then you can typically create an extraordinary experience for the owner and bring an acquisition opportunity to a new organization. So by selling an operating company into another operating entity, they can derive value through acquiring this business that they couldn't achieve on their own. So when we have a closing, there's no losers at the closing table. Everyone is excited because this new owner of the business can do far more with what we've partnered them with than what the existing owners can. And the existing owners now can sunset that aspect of their professional career with a big smile on their face because they've handed it over to someone else.
So for people listening who are business owners or entrepreneurs, what do you tell someone who is in the middle of their operations trying to figure out, how do I know when it's time for me to exit, or how do I know when the right time is for me to exit, or when should I start thinking about this, or just what sort of advice or words of wisdom do you have when people say, how do I know when the time's right to exit?
Well, I think the time to think about it is recurring, right? There's no set fixed point in time that is the end all be all for having that discussion or having that mindset. I think it's unique for each individual business owner. They get to whatever part of their life where they realize now's the time for me to potentially consider monetizing the equity that I've created. What I would say though is that the best thing a business owner from my perspective can do, just like whenever we work together, I had a goal to make sure that there's very little that I was doing that you couldn't do should I get run over by a bus. Business owners, I invite them to think the same way. Run your business and try to make yourself obsolete inside of your enterprise, because the more obsolete you can become, the more valuable your business is. So while you're thinking about the long-term exit of your business, you should be running it as successfully as you can, while trying to provide leadership, guidance, and vision for a team of people inside of an operating company, but making sure that it's not fully dependent upon you as an individual.
Let me interrupt once. I've heard you talk, I can't remember them all, but I've heard you talk about the 3 or 4 or 5 different Ds.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
So a lot of times business owners face, what we refer to as disenfranchisement, divorce, death, distress on the business. And those are the types of disease within a business owner. Those are the types of Ds that cause a business to have to be reactive in their exit. They feel compelled, I've got to sell this now because something external is happening to me. And in those situations, there is a huge industry in the United States and beyond that captures that type of organization and acquires it
and
capitalizes on it. And so what we try to do is to make sure we are aligned with our clients to help them run their business so that should one of those events occur, they do not have to react and end up with a negative experience. But those are really critical factors of which to be aware.
But generally, in an ideal world, the transactions that STS is involved in an ideal world, they don't involve any of the Ds.
That's right.
These companies have been proactive and thoughtful enough to do this at a time where they're doing it on their own volition or by their own volition and not because they're forced to do so.
That's right. And so we look for business leadership and ownership that is forthright, transparent, truthful, and genuinely, authentic about what they want with the ownership of their business, not what we want to hear. Business owners that tell you what you want to hear, they're probably not the right fit for us. But if you're really intentional about what you're trying to achieve, we want to be a part of that journey, and we want to help you reach your Everest, or the top of the peak that you seek. And that is important for us. And then we become the Sherpa to that event for that owner.
And in preparing for today, one thing I learned is that a lot of times, and I'm asking you to give me an example of this, a lot of times you're involved in transactions where business A is kind of taking their business as far as they can possibly take it, and you're gonna ultimately assist, you're gonna help make this happen, but they're gonna ultimately end up in another business that can do far more with this business than they could ever do on their own. So maybe give me an example of what that looks like, and so that people can kind of wrap their head around business A and business B.
Sure. So I'll just try to use some generic real life examples. Sure. But first it starts with what the owning entity wants to do. So sometimes an owner might say, listen, I'm 67 years old. I've owned this business for 30 years. I'm ready to retire. And so I would like you to find an acquisition that lets me fully disengage from the company that I've built and I'm running. Absolutely. That becomes the outcome. That becomes our mandate. Sometimes, though, an owner is in the life cycle of their journey, and they're the part of their journey where the business is kind of reached a peak of what they could accomplish, but they want to go more. Simply put, they might have total command and control of a specific geographic market, and they don't know how to make it national, or they don't know how to make it international. And they might be in their mid-40s, and all of their personal balance sheet of risk is tied up in the equity they own in this business. Maybe this is a time for them to seek a strategic acquirer of their company, allow them to roll a percentage of ownership into a new operating business, and allows them to take a smaller piece of a pie that's going to be a lot bigger. And so, but underneath all of that, Jeffrey, is listening to what the owner tells you they want to achieve and making sure that you embrace that fully. And that can be different for different owners, and there is no one size fits all.
Awesome. All right, so I've heard you in other interviews talk about good housekeeping and how essential it is for businesses to maintain so they're ready when it's time for them to exit. So tell me a little bit about what you mean when you talk about good housekeeping.
I'll run another analogy with you. Anytime somebody's thinking about the exit experience, I look at it to three distinct parts. The first part is almost industrial psychology in a way, right? Or I want to understand why you want to do this. And we need to it needs to make sense. So, hey, Jeffrey, why do you want to sell your business? Well, Billy down the street just got $200 million for his. I think I want to sell mine too. That's not a satisfactory answer. I really want to understand what's underneath it. Going back to the first topic we discussed, which is why. What's underneath this? Once that is profound, real, genuine, and it makes a ton of sense with regard to their personal and professional journey, then we can have a conversation about, now, what do you have to sell? And a lot of times, businesses are loose with regard to their practices. They may not have contractual agreements with their primary customers. How buttoned up are they with regard to their employment agreements, their intellectual property? And when I talk about having the house in order, it's almost like if we were going to sell a house, I'm going to ask you, why are you moving? And then you're going to tell me, well, I've got a new job. I'm moving to Florida. No problem. Well, let's look at the house. Does it need a new roof? Do you need to, do you have some floor work you need to do? Is all the plumbing and light fixtures in order? What do we need to do to clean up about? So you have that second part of the experience. It's very important. And having been, an operator of a business, it allows you to have that credibility when you're giving guidance to a business owner about how to improve what they have. And then the third part is, now that we understand why you're doing it, we understand what you have, now let's get creative about who would want it and who would value it more than your existing ownership group does.
And using the house analogy, STS, are you guys the realtor? Are you guys the inspector? Who is going into the business that wants to sell and saying, here are the housekeeping items that are not in order that you need to prep and get ready so that we can actually do this transaction for you?
At a certain level, that's us, right? Because I mean, we're going to see things. When someone does go through a transaction, they're going to go through due diligence or an inspection, keeping the house analogy in place, and that will be typically a third party that's not obviously conflicted, because we're going to represent the interests of the seller when we're hired to do that work. So the buyer will have their third party that wants to really perform an inspection. But our job is to try to catch that up front and make sure due diligence is smooth.
And I know what you do isn't one size fits all by any stretch of the imagination, but average time frame for, STS comes on board, this thing closes. Like, what is?
I love that question. I get this one all the time.
I'm
What's
sure.
a typical exit timeline look like? It can be 6 weeks to 6 years or more, because we have to learn why. And if that's not clear, the clock has started because you're thinking about it, but you may not have clarity into why you want to exit. Then you have to learn the what. What do you have? The business may not be ready, because sometimes why you're wanting to exit and what you want out of the exit is not supported by the organization that you're operating. And that takes time for it to get ready. And then you now need to figure out who or what organization is going to acquire it. But ultimately, on average, just to give an answer to your listeners, is typically around 12 to 18 months from the time someone is really compelled, they've got a good functioning business. And, one of the things that we say regularly is we're not in for deal flow, we're in for deal quality. And so I would much rather find the right buyer than to find a buyer.
And how frequent, I didn't even realize until you said it, like how frequent is it that the owner selling their business keeps a piece of the business that's buying them, and how often is it just a clean break? I would think it's
varies.
a clean break the majority of the time.
No, it's actually the other way around.
Okay.
Most of the businesses with which we work are on an upward trajectory, and they're very successful, and the owner is proactive and intentional about the monetization effort, and they realize that they would like to be a part of something else. They are ready to go forward. I would say, 2/3 stick around for some period of time. 1/3 are looking for a full retirement.
Okay. And you say stick around and having some sort of ownership and some sort of piece of the business that buys them.
That's right. And being a part of it. It may not necessarily come in the form of equity. It may come in the form of some sort of other mechanism for reward for them to stay around and go with the transaction.
Okay.
'Cause there's a big de-risk that happens to you personally, right? So, if all your asset, people talk about, when they talk about selling houses, they talk about that being the largest personal asset. A lot of times a business owner, an equity position in a business, is the largest personal asset our owner has. And it's often the most difficult asset to monetize. Because I can put a house on the market, there's obviously a tremendous amount of exchange happening in that industry. A business might not necessarily be attractive. And so monetization of tightly held equity in a privately controlled business is often difficult to monetize.
All right, so I'm down to my final formal question for you. So my final formal question is simply this. So as someone who's been a mentor to me and who's been in the trenches in the business world for a very long time and seen a lot, my question is just, if you would, give me 5 words of wisdom or recommendations for business owners or entrepreneurs.
Care, intentionality, transparency, vision, and happiness. There you go. Those would be my 5. Just a good question.
Thank you.
So I have to tell you that I'm going to remind you how this came to be for the audience.
Please.
So you had my friend John Atkins in this seat, and it was a wonderful piece. And the first thing I did after I saw that is I called you and congratulated you on what a fantastic job it was. And I said, when are you going to have the tables turned on you? And you said, well, you need to come do this. And I said, only if I get a chance to ask you some questions, because your journey is incredible to me. I think it's a fascinating journey that I don't think your audience is fully aware of. So I've had a chance to kind of think about some things I'd love for you to comment on, if you don't mind.
I'll do my best.
So the first thing, and since you've got kind of a film component of your life, I think about some of the things that I know about you in that, whether you call it the butterfly effect or sliding doors, where some meaningful events have happened to you in your life that you've been able to truly make lemonade from lemons. So I want to ask you about a few of those along your career and just let you comment openly on them. The first one is you suffered a tremendous injury playing soccer. We share that in common. Talk to me about that injury and how devastating that was for the dreams that you had at that point in time, but how that didn't take you down and what you turned that next opportunity from that injury into as you went from high school to college.
Yeah, so I had a compartment syndrome, broke my leg very seriously on December 20th, 1990, junior year of high school soccer. I was playing for Kempten Schwab, playing against Airline. For many of you who are listening and know Todd Walker. Todd Walker was a senior at the time. He's extremely well known for his baseball abilities, but he was probably the very best athlete I grew up playing against, and he also was a very fine soccer player. We played on teams together when we were really young, and then he played at Airline when I played at Shreve. Anyway, Todd was in the game. He was a senior. I was a junior. Broke my leg very badly. I mean, to answer your question, I think I had 8 surgeries on my leg over the course of 12 to 18 months. I was in bed, I feel like, maybe for 2 months over an 18-month period. And it was the first time that I feel like it was the first time that I was kind of taken out of the action. And I think what it made me do is, I mean, when you're living and you're just in the middle of the action, you don't have a lot of time to see the bigger picture. You don't have a lot of time to hone your observation skills because you're just in it. And so it forced me to not be able to participate anymore. I had to just watch and look and observe. And I think, just to answer your question, I mean, I'm sure it had many changes for me, but probably the most profound one is that I realized, like, that's where I like to be. Like, that's where I think I do my best work, is just, I don't like to be in the middle of things. I like to be slightly outside, slightly at a distance. So I like to watch, and I like to, I mean, that's why I do this podcast. I like to kind of see what's going on in my community and report on it. And I like to tell the stories. I like to put the spotlight on other people. And I think that was the first time that I realized that I do better work here than I do right in the middle of the action.
Excellent. So as you think about going from Kempten Schwab to Washington, and then obviously you developed a strong love for tennis, and obviously that's not quite so risky with regard to a repeat injury of the same nature. I understand that you were also the recipient of a Fulbright scholarship, and you were able to go to France. When that door opened, and to which you're to be tremendously commended, that's an amazing accomplishment. Tell me what happened in France that also created a new opportunity with regard to your ability to watch and observe and further your career.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very much the same sentiment as, I mean, I've never really connected the two, but I think there's a lot of connection. I mean, it's this very same sentiment as breaking your leg and no longer being able to play. being in France, it was the first time that I'd ever seen how other people see us. It's hard to be an American and know what Americans look like and how other people see the world other than Americans, or how other people see you. So I guess breaking my leg was sort of the first layer, or the first step where, okay, I'm seeing the other people in my immediate world from the outside, and then I go to Europe and I'm seeing even a bigger world from the outside, because I'm seeing it from a French and European perspective. And so, now, I mean, if you pinned me down right now and said, if you have 40 years left on this earth, what is your single biggest goal? Right now, I would say I think there's 193 countries in the world. During COVID, one of the realizations I had was that I'd only been to I thought I was well traveled, but I started writing them out when I found out there were 193 countries, and I realized I'd only been to like 12 or 13 at the time. And so I told my wife, Julie, I said, look, here's my commitment to you. I said, this is a big world, and I've been to very little of it. My commitment to you is for the rest of our lives, every year we're going to go to one country at least that we've never been to. And so my biggest goal for the rest of my life, and I won't get there, but I'm going to get as close as I possibly can, is to go to as many countries in this world as I possibly can, because I think that's what my time in France taught me, is that the world is much bigger than Shreveport, the world is much bigger than the U.S., the world is much bigger than France and Europe.
Excellent. So from France, I understand that you started to get an appreciation of French film as well. From France to Los Angeles, and the Los Angeles experience didn't necessarily start off on the best of feet, but I've learned a couple things when asking around about this. I'd love for you to tell me what you learned from Jerry Nachman.
Would you call my brother? Oh man, that's funny. So Jerry Nachman was when I moved out to Los Angeles in 1998. My brother was already out there. My brother Gary, he was originally pursuing a career in the film business. Gary lived up in the Hollywood Hills area. He lived in a guest house behind a gentleman named Jerry Nachman. Jerry was I think a pretty accomplished writer. He wrote for the New York Post, and he had come out to LA to try and have a successful career as a screenwriter. I mean, when we talk about Jerry Nachman, I think of two things. One, I think it was the first time that someone made me feel that, which I do acknowledge now, that, my dad's a doctor, that I come from a more privileged background than a lot of people. And so I would go visit my brother, or maybe I was staying with my brother at the time, and I lost my keys a number of times, and I would knock on Jerry's door because he had a key to my brother's place in the back, and I had to do it like 2 or 3 times because I was just so irresponsible at the time. And I remember Jerry sitting me down, and no one else had ever said this to me in my life, and just making me feel like I was just so privileged, so irresponsible, so immature, so unprepared for the real world. And it was one of those, you have those moments in life, I had one in college too, where people sort of dangle something in front of you and make you feel lesser than. And I come from a competitive background, so when someone does that, I believed him, and I didn't think he was wrong, but it was sort of a challenge for the rest of my life. Like, okay, well, I'm not going to be that person. I'm going to prove that, like, yeah, I may have been given that, but I'm going to do something with it. So that was the first thing that probably I learned from Jerry. The second thing is Jerry had a book on his shelf, the Mammoth Book of Pulp Fiction, and it was a collection of short stories. And at the time, when I moved to LA, I wanted to be a director, but I didn't really want to be a writer-director. So there are directors who direct but don't write. There are directors who write and direct, or directors like Clint Eastwood and Kevin Costner who act, write, and direct. There are directors like Charlie Chaplin who write, direct, act, and edit, or even Charlie Chaplin's case, compose the score. So anyway, I just wanted to direct, and so I had decided when I moved to LA that the best way for me to make it as a director was to either find people who wrote, who didn't want to direct themselves, or find things that I could hire someone to adapt that had already been written. And so I was reading a lot of short stories at the time, and Jerry had this book, a mammoth book of Pulp Fiction, and it was a collection of about 30 to 40 detective mystery type short stories written by the likes of Dashiell Hammett or Raymond Chandler, or one of them by Max Allan Collins. And that's when I first read A Matter of Principle, which became the 6th short film that I directed and the basis of the only feature-length film that I directed.
Fantastic. So I know there are a couple other California experiences I'd like to pull on a little bit. I know that you actually cut your teeth selling Bali furniture. Now, this I know on my own, but I think that you've shared with me in the past, and I'd love for your audience to know some of the things you learned by what one would think is really simple of selling furniture. But there's some things underneath and beyond furniture that you gathered from that experience that I think would be worthwhile in sharing.
I'm not sure what you're alluding to, but I mean, you and I share this. I mean, you're better at it than I am, but it was the first time in my life that I realized I could sell. I never took any sales courses. I never took any, I had never sold before. And I mean, the first thing that I didn't know if I could sell, but I needed a job and to supplement my film aspirations. And I started doing it, and I realized for me, like, I could connect selling and competing. And that was an easy connection for me to make, and I realized, like, I'm actually pretty good at this. I don't know exactly what you're alluding to. I mean, I learned a ton in my 4 years.
I'll help you out.
But I'll tell you what. I mean, the only other thing I want to say I can remember. Well, go ahead.
So the thing that I remember you saying once was something along the lines of, you don't sell furniture, you sell the experience. You don't sell furniture, you sell.
Oh, that's interesting.
I can't remember when you said this, but it was very meaningful, and it was something along the lines of you listening. You gathered from, whether it be the alarm company that you also worked for, the ability to ask the question and wait for the answer, and then also the catering to the celebrities about image and experience. And I just remember some of the stories of that resonated with me.
Yeah, I think I will say, I was selling a feeling. So we catered to a lot of celebrities, and it was a Indonesian furniture store run by Dennis Linkletter, who was Art Linkletter's son, who a lot of people will know Art Linkletter. And it was a very moody, peaceful place. And somehow early on, I realized, like, if I could make people feel like if they bought the furniture, they would have this peace and sense of enlightenment and contentment in their lives, then I would be successful. And so, I realized my selling technique there was just the opposite of what most people think is a salesperson. I would say as little as possible. I would do 5% of the talking, and I would try and make people feel really relaxed and calm, and try and on some level make them believe that if I bought this, I'm gonna achieve the same level of Zen comfort that I have right now with this individual once I get this piece of furniture in my house.
So 2 more questions, one fairly serious and one a little bit of fun.
Yeah.
On the serious side, you are truly one of the most authentic, genuine people that does not have an ulterior motive that I've ever met. I mean, you are amazing with regard to doing good to do good, and to lean and live that way. And I'm curious, because I've worked and engaged with hundreds of people around the world, and you're in the top 1/10% of genuine authenticity. Where do you from where did that come? And where do you give credit for that? Not it's real. It's as core as it can be. From where did that come in your history, and where did that come, and what makes you that way?
First off, thank you. I don't know. I mean, I definitely have an obsession with truth. And I mean, like I like to curate restaurants and I like to curate film. And so I I don't know if I believe in past lives, but I mean, that's why I like doing this work. I mean, there's a journalistic aspect of me. I like to try and dig and try and reach something that feels authentic and true, whatever it is. I want the most authentic tasting thing. I want film in its purest form. I can only trust things that I believe are true. And so I think that's kind of my life's work is getting at the truth of what I'm supposed to be doing here. I mean, some of it, sure, it comes from my parents. I mean, my parents are upstanding, incredible people. I don't know. I mean, I think, such a hard question. I only really appreciate things that I believe are true, I guess. And
I think the fact that you struggle with the answer is evidence of the trait itself. So it's just an amazing attribute that you have, and one that you should be commended for. All right, on to the fun.
Thank you.
On to the fun
Okay.
one. So you and I do have some wonderful experiences. One of my favorites, though, is one of your businesses that are really successful. They know how to stay in their lane, right? They know exactly what they do really well, and in a short order, they can answer the question of what they do, and they can answer it in a way that you will believe that they're the best in the world at doing exactly what that is. You and I found ourselves in New Jersey one afternoon, and I asked the proprietor of a restaurant if he had a Peroni, and his answer was, not here. Perfect. Not going to get, but he doesn't have, and he's not trying to accommodate you. And man, his food was amazing. I would have never found the place had I not been with you. So my fun question for you: you get 5 meals in the United States of America, the top 5 Jeffrey spots nationwide. If you ask me for 5 words, I'd eat 5 spots.
Shoot. 5 spots in the U.S. only?
In just the U.S., I wasn't gonna open up the world to your global citizenship.
Well, I got to think of it as like a Last Supper thing.
Okay.
So I know one, and I'm not even a sweets person, but my Last Supper dessert is coconut pie from Lee's in LeCount.
Okay.
And I almost got to think of it that way. Like if I can only eat one, so what do I have to have? So I'm gonna think of it more as like, what are the 5 what I think are the best bites? I'm thinking. Well, that place we used to go to, Spiritos, had incredible chicken parmesan. It's no longer open, by the way. So that would have been up there. That was something that, like, I would go to sleep at night and wonder, can I ever have it again? And I don't have the money right now, but should I just fly out there so I can have it again? So hard. I mean, I love Orlando's gumbo, so some sort of gumbo. It just makes me feel like I'm connected to my place. In the U.S., there was a taco stand in L.A., Yucca's, still open. I introduced Gary, my brother, to it. Probably the carne asada taco at Yucca's. I don't know if I ever took you there. I probably did.
We have not been to Yucca's.
Okay.
Phillips, yes.
Yeah.
Also one on the defunct list.
That's right.
Man had me on Crenshaw Boulevard in Compton to eat barbecue, which is a story unto itself.
Oh, thank you. So Smitty's Barbecue in Lockhart, Texas.
Okay.
With the white bread or Wonder Bread, just unbelievable spot, been around forever. So what is that? Smitty's, Yucca's, gumbo from Orlando's, coconut pie from Lee's, and I need one more. It's got to be some... Oh, and I said chicken parm at Spiritos.
There you go.
Okay.
Fair enough. Global citizen. You know what? I tell people all the time, don't be a global citizen, or don't be a global tourist, be a global citizen. You definitely exemplify that.
Well, Kempten, I was going to give you an opportunity. Is there anything else you want to say about, I mean, we could cover a million things. I mean, for those of you who don't know, Kempten and I, we were road warriors together, traveled all over the country together, spent many of an hour together. I learned a tremendous amount from you. I learned more today. I appreciate you wanting to learn about me. But is there anything else you want to say about your time in Shreveport, about just life in general? I know you're a divided family now. You were a Gamecock, your daughter's at Clemson. So anything you want to say, we have all the time in the world.
Sure. I'll just say that my time in Shreveport was wonderful. I became an adult in Shreveport. And as I was telling you when we first sat down, I thought about the Turnpike Troubadours song, Shreveport. You know, there are things down there I learned that you can't learn in school or whatever their lyric is. And I definitely did that here. I grew up in this town, and for that I'm forever grateful. My daughter is a junior at Clemson, and she is proud to be from Shreveport, and she loves telling people that she is from Shreveport, Louisiana, and so she is carrying the Pelican banner across the Palmetto State. And we do have fun. My wife and I both went to South Carolina, and our daughter's at Clemson. But, you know, I've yet to figure out how to prosper in a tightly controlled geographic area, so I travel tremendously, and I've enjoyed being back in town for the last 24, 48 hours, a nice walk or two down memory lane, and I just thank you very much for having me and allowing me to, kind of pull out a little bit of some of the unique parts of your life that I think are representative and valuable for this community. So I appreciate you having me, Jeffrey.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kempten.
My pleasure,
Always
brother.
great being with you.
Yes, sir.